Welcome to Warrior of Honor channel. Subscribe to be aware of all the latest news around Ukraine and the world. Today we will talk about the potential of Ukraine to attack in the southern direction, including the liberation of Crimea. According to the latest intelligence data of advanced countries, Russia fears major offensive actions by Ukraine in two sectors, in the Zaporizhzhia and Luhansk regions. The British Special Services draw attention to the fact that in recent weeks, Russia has strengthened defense fortifications in the Zaporizhzhia region, especially between the cities of Vasilivka and Orikov, and maintains great strength in this sector. A major Ukrainian breakthrough in Zaporizhzhia would seriously question the viability of the Russian land corridor, connecting Russia's Rostov region and occupied Crimea, and Ukraine's success in Luhansk region, would further undermine Russia's declared military goal of liberating Donbass. The Ministry of Defense said in a statement Britain, which refers to its intelligence. The British agency believes that deciding which of these threats to counter is likely to be one of the main dilemmas for Russian military commanders. Peter Dickinson, an employee of the American Analytical Center Atlantic Council, believes that the most obvious place for an attack by the armed forces is in the Azov region. An offensive in the area of Berdyansk or Melitopol will allow isolating Russian troops and cutting off supplies from Crimea. In addition, such an offensive may turn out to be more large-scale compared to the attack in the Kherson area, where the Russian forces were, in fact, cut off and blocked. The supply of weapons in the amount already announced by Ukraine's Western partners may create the prerequisites for an offensive by the armed forces. According to the latest data, it is known that the USA is ready to provide 50 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles and 100 armored personnel carriers in the coming weeks. This is not a bad addition to the arsenal that the armed forces have. They are also talking about the possible supply of 40 or 50 armored vehicles from Germany. Martyr. In 2022, the Ukrainian military liberated 40% of the territories occupied after February 24 and 28% of all occupied territories. The commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Valery Zaluzhny, reported. According to him, today the Ukrainian military continues to restrain the enemy on a land area with a length of 3,786 kilometers. The absolute majority of surveyed Ukrainians, 97%, are confident that Ukraine will be able to repel Russia's attack, according to the survey conducted by the Rating Sociological Group. According to this survey, 85% of Ukrainians believe that Ukraine's victory in the war with Russia will be the liberation of all its territories, including Crimea and Donbass. The counteroffensive of the armed forces of Ukraine should isolate the temporarily occupied Crimea and deprive Russian troops of supplies. Defense forces of Ukraine advancing in the south and east can isolate Crimea and redeploy HIMARS and other high-precision, long-range weapons to inflict devastating blows on the logistics system of the Russian armed forces. President Vladimir Putin and the Ministry of Defense of Russia are trying to create the conditions for a protracted war in Ukraine. The Kremlin is preparing at least two scenarios for the continuation of the war against the Ukrainian people. This was reported by analysts of the American Institute for the Study of War (ISDO). The Russian Federation announced plans for a radical expansion of the armed forces by forming new divisions, restoring military districts in the west of Russia, and increasing the conscription age. All this testifies to Russia's intentions, though not to its ability, to reform the armed forces for conducting large-scale battles. Earlier, the main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine reported that the Kremlin aims to increase the number of military personnel to 2 million people. And in Western intelligence, there is talk of a possible second wave of mobilization. The Russian military command may try to launch a major offensive in the Luhansk region. The complete capture of Donetsk and Luhansk regions remains the Kremlin's official goal, albeit a rather difficult one. But from a logistical point of view, Donetsk and Luhansk regions are the territories that are easiest for Russia to capture. ISDO analysts believe that the Russian army is unlikely to conduct an offensive in the south of Ukraine, in the Kherson or Zaporizhzhia regions. The Dnipro River divides the front line in the Kherson region and is a serious obstacle for the maneuver of the invaders. In addition, the field fortifications of the Russians in the Kherson region and large mines in the Zaporizhzhia region indicate that the Russian Federation prefers defense. In late 2022, the Kremlin moved most units from the southern Kherson direction to Luhansk Oblast and built field fortifications in Luhansk Oblast, as well as in Russia's Belgorod and Kursk oblasts. Earlier, ISDO experts reported signs that the armed forces of Ukraine are seeking to launch a counteroffensive in 2023. In addition, Ukrainian officials have long publicly signaled their intention to launch a counteroffensive this year, and Russian bloggers have been warning about Ukrainian counterattacks for a long time. The Kremlin seeks to secure the occupied territories in Donbas and avoid another major defeat, as in Kharkiv Oblast or Kherson. Two recent events have significantly undermined Russian morale and faith in the ability of their troops to achieve larger goals, such as the mythical demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine. It can be assumed that the Russians will try to successfully repulse the counteroffensive of the Ukrainian troops and deprive Ukraine of the initiative by destroying a significant part of the mechanized forces of the Ukrainian armed forces. If the Russian Federation succeeds in this, then, according to analysts, it may enable the Russian army to launch a counteroffensive. The official position of the Ukrainian government is clear. Its forces will continue fighting until they have recaptured all of Ukraine's internationally recognized territory. That is, not just the areas Russian forces have captured since their February invasion, but all the territory they have occupied since 2014. This includes the Crimean Peninsula, which Moscow formally recognized as its own after staging a hasty and flawed referendum 8 years ago. In the early days of the war, a battle for Crimea seemed highly unlikely. The Ukrainians had enough to worry about simply halting the Russian advance. But now the Ukrainians are on the offensive, and now senior Ukrainian leaders are sounding optimistic about retaking the peninsula. So far, despite some tense moments, the US-led Western alliance has been able to pursue its sometimes contradictory goals in Ukraine, giving the Ukrainians what they need to counter the Russian invasion and avoiding an all-out war between nuclear-armed superpowers. Crimea, some suggest, could change that. Russian President Vladimir Putin's annexation of Crimea, a territory Russians long viewed as unjustly severed by the collapse of the Soviet Union, was enormously popular with the Russian public. Because of the territory's role in the birthplace of Russian Orthodox Christianity, Putin has even referred to it as Holy Land. Russians may view Ukraine as a whole as spiritually part of Russia, to put it in Putin-esque terms, but they view Crimea as literally part of Russia. Losing it would be a far greater political blow than any of the captured territory Russia has abandoned so far in this war. For obvious reasons, the question of whether Putin would order the use of a nuclear weapon to prevent the loss of Crimea has gotten the most attention. But Edmonds noted, there are many capabilities the Russian military has that it has not used in this conflict. Undersea capabilities, anti-space capabilities. There's a whole toolbox of things they have that could raise the stakes. Beyond these risks, a Ukrainian campaign to retake Crimea would no doubt extend the war. With growing questions over the West's political will, as well as its physical stocks of ammunition and other supplies, it's possible policymakers in some capitals will wonder if it's worth continuing to fight to retake an area they weren't willing to fight for in 2014. Despite this, the goal of the people of Ukraine and the authorities is unchanged. Volodymyr Zelensky and a number of other politicians and the military have clearly stated that the war will end with the liberation of the entire Ukrainian territory. Judging by the latest data, their position will remain unchanged, and soon we will see a number of new operations, including the liberation of the Crimean Peninsula.